All right. I think we can get started. It looks like the numbers have slowed down. Uh, first of all, welcome to our panel discussion, which is part of our Stomp Out Stigma campaign, Real Stories of Attorney Recovery and Holiday Challenges. My name is Amy Levine, Director of Programs and Volunteers here at Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, and I will be the moderator of today's discussion. I'll also introduce our panelists shortly. As many of you know, research consistently shows that lawyers experience significantly higher rates of hazardous drinking, depression, and anxiety than the general population. In the NORC report from 2023, it showed that 42% of lawyers experience hazardous drinking, and yet only 2% of those lawyers sought help. That gap between need and support is what brings us here today. Our goal is to normalize help seeking within the legal community and to begin dismantling the stigma that is so often stands in the way. Stigma, along with other time pressures and fear of professional repercussions, remains one of the primary reasons lawyers do not reach out for support when they need it most, and we want to help change that narrative. At the heart of this effort is a broader vision, creating a legal culture where attorneys, judges, law school students can prioritize their health and well-being without fear, without concern that doing so will jeopardize their careers or reputations. One of the most powerful ways to reduce that stigma is through connection and shared experience. And when we hear from others in the profession, lawyers, judges, and law school students who are willing to speak openly about their lived experience and their journeys to recovery, it reminds us that we are not alone and that recovery and resilience are possible. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Also, we'll be taking questions at the end of the discussion, so please use the chat function for that. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Stephen Wall is the global managing partner of Morgan Lewis and senior partner in the labor and employment practice. He has served as a national board member and chair of the board of trustees of Caron Treatment Centers, which is a nationally recognized substance use disorder treatment provider. Unfortunately, just to note, Beth Myers actually cannot join us today. She is on trial. So next is Bernardo Cudrera, is an assistant attorney general and deputy chief of the False Claims Division of the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office, where he oversees the Division of False Claims, Investigations, and Litigation. He's a member and past co-chair of the AGO's Wellbeing Committee and a member of the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing and an adjunct professor at New England Law. Finally, but certainly not least, Casey Miller is a senior counsel in the DC office of Proskauer Rose and is part of the structured credit group specializing in advising on a broad range of structured finance transactions. She is currently the vice chair of the DC Bar's Lawyers Assistance Committee. I encourage you to read their full bios on the website. So welcome to all of our panelists. So let's get started. Could each of you share your recovery story, what brought you to the point of recognizing you needed help, and what was that help you received? Bernardo, you are at the top of my screen, so let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks very much. My name is Bernardo, and I am an alcoholic. And, that's something that, I didn't used to say to a small group of people, even a small group of friends, never mind a large group of strangers. But I appreciate why we're here, and it's important for me to say that. And I'm really grateful to share the space with Stephen and Casey. So thanks, Amy and LCL, for putting this on. Yeah, I won't get into all the drama and messiness of my drinking years, but I'll tell you the kind of drinker I was, right? I started drinking in high school. And really, from the beginning, I was a binge blackout drinker. I pursued the drunk. I didn't really like the taste of alcohol, but I liked how it made me feel, and it helped me talk to people. It helped me feel more comfortable. It helped me sort of, at least in my head, fit in, right? At least what I thought that was like. And there was a time where I had fun and I was in high school and I was doing a lot of things that other people were doing. Um, but it didn't take long for me to get in trouble, right? I mean, I had run-ins with the law through high school and college. I got in trouble with the administration at my college. I had to take some time off. After my freshman year, I had to do a 10-day outpatient rehab program so I could continue my education. Um, and what was interesting about that program was that I actually learned and believed early on that, or came to understand early on that I did have a drinking problem. And I think for some folks, it takes a while to get to that point. I kind of being in that rehab program learned that I couldn't drink safely. I couldn't drink normally. But I was at a point in my life, and when I went back to college, where I still wasn't ready to stop drinking because it solved a lot of these problems I thought I had. These problems around feeling comfortable around other people, and I also had like fun. And this is something that I sort of wanted to make the point tonight, which was one of the reasons that made it hard for me to stop for so long was that I didn't know what stopping looked like. I didn't know how I would have fun. I didn't know how I would be able to hang out with my friends or watch a baseball game or play wiffle ball in my backyard if I wasn't drinking. And so I really couldn't wrap my head around this idea um, of sobriety. And I had this sort of identity that I developed as I got into more trouble, and it had more stories that sort of became part of who I was through college and afterwards. I took 7 years off between college and law school, and really kind of got lucky in terms of not getting into any like real trouble, but my drinking progressed. And, there were definitely issues with relationships, with my family. Um, I was getting behind the wheel of a car way more often than I should have been under the influence. Um, and, I just managed to not get into any, like I got a DUI when I was 18. I had a few other run-ins, but nothing in my after graduating college. Um, and it was really a few months after I became a dad in 2007 that I had my last drink. And it's no coincidence that I stopped drinking shortly after becoming a dad. It is ironic, I think, that I stopped drinking 2 weeks before I started law school. I think that that's kind of counter to what a lot of people experience. But yeah, August 19th, 2007 is my sobriety date, um, and I started law school a couple weeks later. You know, at that time, I was I accepted that I again couldn't drink normally. Like for me, it was sort of like a risk calculation. As a new dad, I really wanted the number, like the percentage chance that I would get into an accident or do something dangerous that would harm my son or make it difficult for me to parent my son. Like that number needed to be zero. And so, really, on a day-to-day basis, the calculus for me was like, if I don't pick up a drink, then I'm not going to do this. Like, there's no way that this bad thing will happen as a result of my drinking. So that was, I was focused on the physical side of my alcoholism. And through law school and for a year or two afterwards, that was my focus. I wasn't engaged in a recovery program. But something that we hear in 12-step programs a lot that I identify with a lot is this idea of alcohol wasn't the problem, it was the solution. And that's something that I really resonate with because I had, insecurities, I had fears, I had all this stuff that alcohol, at least in my head, made me feel better about. But when I took the alcohol away, all those, insecurities, all those fears, um, those underlying issues were still there, and I didn't know um, how to treat them, how to handle them. So I did end up slowly but surely finding my way into a 12-step program. Um, with all of that, right? I think the theme here being like, how does this intersect with the legal profession? I will say that all of that took place kind of behind the curtain, I'd say. Back in 2007, when I started law school, there were no well-being committees. There was no LCL has been around for over 40 years, but there really hadn't been this the same kind of support system and sort of public conversations that we're having now that didn't exist back in 2007 and when I was in law school. So I didn't really talk to anybody about it. I was like focused on law school. I was focused on being a dad. Like I worked really, really, really hard. That was one of the substitutes for my alcohol was like staying very late and working very hard. Um, but one thing that happened early on, very early on in law school that I want to mention is that um, I think within the first couple of months, I had to meet with one of the associate deans at my school, and we had a conversation about some of the trouble I got in when I was in college. And it was during this conversation that this individual disclosed to me that they were a recovering alcoholic who had been in sobriety for over 20 years. And that still to this day is like a really meaningful disclosure and connection and friendship, knowing that there was this successful, legal professional who had practiced for many years and who was, a senior administrator at the school who was in recovery and had gone through like and gotten to, had his own story and was willing to share that with me. And I remember when I was 6 months sober for the first time, I went down to the office and this person had just come back from a local LCL meeting, and I said, "Hey, I didn't know anything about sort of sharing like an anniversary story or a milestone, recovery milestone. I just said I've never been 6 months sober before, but that's today." And this person got right up out of the chair and gave me a big hug, and the best thing. They said it was the best news they've heard all week, and that kind of connection, that kind of community that I think exists in the recovery space is is really energizing. It's really filled that void for me in a way that alcohol couldn't, that work couldn't, and it's what brings me here today. And I'm sure we'll have more chance to talk about why we tell our stories, but that's part of mine. So thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We definitely appreciate it. And Stephen, we'd love to hear your recovery
Yeah,
story.
thank you, Amy, and welcome everybody who's on the webinar. Just to play off of what Bernardo just said, so his recovery journey began before he entered law school. Mine began 30 years after I entered law school. I spent the vast majority of my professional life um, in alcoholism, active alcoholism. And I think the only reason why, as I look back now, I think the only reason why I was able to continue in the profession is that I was able to manage the consequences while ignoring the underlying problem. Um, my sobriety date is March 10th of 2010, and I entered law school in 1980. So it was a long run for me to continue to be in addiction. And as we know, it is a progressive disease. So as life goes on, those consequences became harder and harder to deal with. And ultimately, in March of 2010, my life started to crash around me. I had been serving at that time almost exactly 1 year as the managing partner of Morgan Lewis. It was a job that I accepted, a service role that I believed I could be good at. But as the pressures of that role continued to mount, and just the 24/7 intensity of both practicing law on a daily basis and being a managing partner for a firm of our size, I accelerated, intensified my use of alcohol as a means of turning my brain off to a point where all of those protections that I'd put up to prevent my alcoholism from being known or seen by anyone just disappeared. And my final drink was the final drink was actually over a period of about 12 hours from a dinner on a Wednesday night in Washington, D.C., a business dinner, continuing with a flight to Houston the next morning, and then being in a state where I was unable to go through with the meetings that I had scheduled in our Houston office for that next Thursday morning. And that was the first time in my life that I was desperate enough that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired and fighting what I knew by then was a serious mental health issue. I finally asked for help, and that help led to, with the grace of my higher power, not having put any alcohol in my body since that day. And that was now just about 15 and a half years ago. So it was obviously a major change in my life, and one that still to this day amazes me that it took that long. I know enough about the disease of alcoholism and substance abuse now to be able to explain to myself analytically why it took that long. I'm genetically loaded to be an alcoholic. Alcoholism is rampant on both sides of my families. Both sides of my family. Both of my parents died of the disease. Two of my brothers died at an early age as a direct result of alcohol. One in a car crash when he was 20, and the other of a heart attack when he was 50. And there, but for the grace of God, go I, because over 30 years of drinking since I entered law school, and another, 6 or 7 or 8 before I even went to law school, I was the type of drinker who would drink to excess almost every time I drank. The so-called life of the party in high school, college, even law school. And even when I started to practice law, found opportunities and excuses to engage, as Bernardo said, engage in the fun around drinking. The difference was that all of my colleagues were having fun for an hour or two, where I would have fun until the bar closed, or I passed out, or there was something physical interfering with my ability to keep drinking. And as time went on in my life, that might be the plane lands and I can no longer drink while I'm flying, or the dinner's over and I have to, stop ingesting the wine or whatever else I was drinking. I know now, I look back now and I know that I was in active alcoholism since I was 16 or 17 years old. And all the things I hated about my parents, their alcoholism, how it affected our lives, how it affected their lives, all of those things I hated about that, I was becoming that myself. I got sober when I was 53 years old, and my father died of this disease when he was 55. And I was headed directly towards that same result. If I didn't have that moment of grace at what was hopefully my bottom, I hope I never have to experience anything like that again. But my recovery journey is ongoing, as it is with all of us who are part of this community. It's not a one-day thing. It's not a 1 month or 1 week thing. There is no quote cure to the underlying disease, but there is a treatment, there is a program, there is an ability to stay healthy for as long as you live if you take advantage of all of the resources that are available to us, including the 12-step program that I participate in, that keeps me grounded in what I need to do every day in order to stay in recovery. So thanks, Amy.
Yeah, thank you. Quick question. Did you end up going to a treatment center initially, or was it
Mhm.
like going directly to an AA meeting?
Mhm.
What was
Yep.
that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did. After that incident in March of 2010, I ended up going to a treatment center for 30 days. I ended up taking a leave of absence, which was very, very difficult for me to believe could even be possible. Like most of us who practice law, um, I felt a obligation to my clients. I felt that their world and my world would end if I stopped practicing law for even one day. I felt an obligation to my firm, for which I served as managing partner. And how could the firm possibly survive without me being there every day? The the disease wants us to believe that focusing on ourselves and addressing the underlying causes of what leads us to drink and abuse drugs, um, that is unnecessary because we're strong enough to be able to do it ourselves. And so for um, many years prior to my recovery, I tried various remedies. Um, I visited a psychiatrist and then lied to him about my drinking. I would parachute into AA meetings once a month or so, never appearing at the same one twice, never really participating, never engaging, never taking advantage of the program. I would, practice abstinence and then be proud of myself because I didn't drink for a month and pick up right where I left off. I would drink um, a beer and then two glasses of water before I had the next beer. And all that did is lead me to run to the men's room every half hour when I was out. I tried everything that Steve, thought might regulate my drinking, but I never accepted two critical things. Even the first drink was too many for me, and I couldn't do it myself. What I finally accepted was that I couldn't do it myself.
Mhm.
And that took rehab. That took, leaving my profession, leaving my family, walking into to a rehab center, um, having the very kind gentlemen who were escorting to my room, unfolding my socks, reaching into my pant pockets, trying to figure out what I was sneaking in, and I'm completely oblivious to what's going on around me, not understanding that they understand the desperation that a true addict has to try to find a drink anywhere. And that I often say that 30 days in rehab not only saved my life because it turned me onto the right path, but it gave me a foundation upon which to then build, in which I have then built upon over the last 15 and a half years. Um, and that foundation, whether it is a rehab, whether it's an intensive outpatient program, whether it's just walking into the rooms of AA and doing what I didn't do, which is ask for help, make yourself available, get to know people. Um, all of them have the same common characteristic, which is that you cannot do this yourself. You have to do it preferably with other people who are in recovery because they understand everything you're going through. But you have to seek help in order to get out of yourself so
Mhm.
that you can see with clarity what's really going on in your life.
Well, thank you. And that's again, it's the seeking help, right? That
Mhm.
that is so difficult.
Mhm.
I also wanted to mention really quickly that you talked about going on a leave of absence, and
Mhm.
we did a panel discussion. David Rosenblatt, managing partner of Barnes and Levinson, which has since dissolved, Beth Myers, and Sean Healy, on being able to seek that leave if you need it. It's going to be
Mhm.
better for yourself, family, but also the firm. And if the firm is smart enough, we'll say, it's allowing that person to take that leave and then return. So it is about retention as well. So again, thank you so much for sharing that. Casey, would you share your story with us?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. Um, I am Casey and Miller, and I am a senior counsel at Proskauer, and I got sober during law school. And I actually saw a question pop up in the Q&A about law school functions, and I'll touch on that. But yeah, without going into too much of the details, I did also start drinking in high school, like Bernardo mentioned. And, you know, as Stephen mentioned, I was the life of the party, had a lot of fun. High school was great. I got my first underage. I actually had a party and 40 people got arrested at it. So that was something. But it was like a badge of honor, and it was a pride thing then. And then I went to college at Penn State, which was a big party school, and joined a sorority and just very much immersed in drinking culture. I still managed to be the most drunk person in the room at, you know, these frat parties. Like, so I was just like terrorizing frat houses during college. I mean, I had way too much fun, but I was still, you know, doing well in school, well enough. I think one of the themes of my drinking in my life was the worse my drinking got, the more I had to make up for that externally. So, like for example, after my freshman year of college, I switched my major from marketing to mechanical engineering. And I said, okay, well, if I get an engineering degree, I don't have a problem. You know, as long as I'm good on paper, that's all that matters. So I did that, and I was just racking up charges. And I'm touching on this because so many people are concerned about applying to the bar with a, you know, criminal history. And I had quite a rap sheet by the time I was done. But you know, all drinking related, disorderly conduct, public drunkenness, um, fighting. I got a fighting charge, which was interesting. And that was, I think, like getting, anyway, it was just a mess. But again, I was doing okay in school, so I didn't see a problem with it. And I did graduate. I got involved in politics my last year of college and moved to Washington, D.C. to work on Capitol Hill. Again, an environment with a strong drinking culture. And I leaned into that. I drank pretty much every day at happy hour after work. I went 3 years without getting any sort of citations. I also used to go to the hospital, not often, but you know, more times than the average person for like alcohol poisoning. And so I went 3 years without any sort of incident after college. And so I thought I was fine. I didn't think there was any sort of problem, even though I was drinking still very much. But I did think that I was wasting a lot of time. And I said, okay, I am wasting too much time after work at happy hour, and you need to be more productive with your time. So I enrolled in law school kind of to manage my, like indirectly, like manage my drinking. Because I wanted to be more productive. I didn't know how to pick up a hobby. God forbid I, you know, learn how to play tennis or something. But so I enrolled in law school at night, and it worked. I didn't really have to, I was working all day and going to school at night, studying on the weekends, and I didn't have time to drink the way I wanted to. Because for me, like unless you were getting drunk, there was really no point to drinking. I was never, you know, a classy drinker who had a glass of red wine with a nice Italian meal. Like I was Natty Light and Franzia, because it was mostly college and when I was in my early 20s. But so So yeah, I only drank about once a month that year. When I did drink, I consumed a month's worth of alcohol in one night. Um, and I finished my first year of law school. I actually did rather well, but I got out of my last final that year and essentially went on a 6-week bender. I was still going into work every day, but I didn't have that constraint anymore of law school and class after work and studying on the weekends. That structure was gone after I finished my last final, and it was just back to the races. And then my big moment was June 15th, 2012. Um, I did get arrested, and for the first time in my life, for just, being drunk and disorderly, outside of the White House. So I was arrested by the Secret Service, which is a fun fact. But yeah, this time I don't remember it, but when I woke up the next morning at the police station, I was terrified. For the first time, I felt like I had a lot to lose. I was in law school, I was doing well, I had a job that I loved on Capitol Hill. And I saw, my life, and I was like, this is, I was scared. And I begged the officer to let me go. And he said, I'll never forget this conversation. He said, "You'll never change. People like you never change." And I said, I promise you let me go. I'm done. And I didn't really think I was going to quit drinking, but he did let me go. He didn't charge me with anything. And I, I went, the other different thing about this incident was it was public and in front of a lot of people who worked on Capitol Hill. So a lot of people took my picture and videos. And thank God it was before the age really of Instagram and YouTube, and there was no live streaming or anything like that. But members of Congress did see the pictures, and it was humiliation beyond my wildest dreams. I can't even I think I went into shock because it was just so mortifying. And the member of Congress that I worked for said, "Casey, do you have a drinking problem?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but it's never affected my work." And she was like, "Okay, that's a bizarre answer. Why don't you go talk to the employee assistance program?" And so I went and I talked to them. And again, I'm just terrified about losing my job. That is all I care about. That is my whole identity. That is everything to me. Um, and I was scared for the first time in my life. And so I would have done anything. In the employee assistance program, they said, "Why don't you go to AA?" And I was like, whatever I got to do, I'll do it. So I went, and I thought it was a joke. And I told everyone in the office, okay, I'm going to my AA meeting to do something about my drinking problem. And I told everyone at law school, I'm going to AA. Isn't that hilarious? But I went, and um, as it turned out, I loved it, and it was full of great people. And I wasn't expecting that. So and I did learn some lessons there. Um, and then I did have to resign from that job. And though I did not plan on quitting drinking, by the time I had to resign, I was 2 months into the sober thing. And I said, well, I guess I'm just sober now. So I might as well stick with it. Um, and yeah, that was 13 and a half years ago. Um, And I'm very glad I have never practiced law while drinking. I have no idea how people do this and keep clients. Because I was thinking about this today when I was thinking about what I'd talk about. I'm friends with my clients. My clients would have gotten drunk texts from me. They would have gotten drunk drunk emails, drunk calls, I was a big drunk dialer. Like I just don't understand how people who have drinking problems can practice because, and you also have to be on call all the time, in this job. And if I wasn't at full capacity, I wouldn't be able to do my job well. So for me, sobriety is just an essential component to my life. I'm very happily married to someone who would not have talked to me. Well, I was a degenerate alcoholic. Um, Everything about my life now is only possible because of sobriety. So yes, I'm very grateful for that. And I was admitted to the bar. Um, I applied, I guess it would have been 2015. And at that point, I had been sober 3 years, and I disclosed that to them. And I said, I had to add a catch-all at the end of the criminal history section. I had to add like, this is everything I remember and everything I could track down. You might be able to find more stuff. I'm not hiding anything. I just don't remember it all. And they still just said, congrats on your sobriety. Welcome to the New York bar. So it's been an excellent journey. And yeah, that's all I can think of at the top of my head. I have some couple anecdotes I want to touch on later, but we'll get to that. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Casey. Definitely appreciate it. And thinking about the culture, I know, again, all
Mm,
different stories, right? Bernardo, you got sober before law school, Casey during law school, and then Stephen while you were practicing. Can you talk a little bit about what you think the pressures are that I guess make it extra challenging to stay sober in this legal environment, or anything like that? Casey, do you want to start?
sure, because someone did ask about law school. I will say I became wildly more popular after I quit drinking. When I was drinking, I was fun for a little bit, but then it was like, Casey, we're sick of making excuses for you, and I didn't have to worry anymore about what I was going to say or what was going to happen. I didn't wake up wondering what happened last night. And I found at social functions, the only people that have ever cared whether I was drinking are people who most certainly have problems themselves. Like no one who drinks normally or socially cares at all what other people are drinking. I think that, the people that care are the ones that want to feel not alone and kind of uh what's the word I'm looking for? They internalize seeing people not drinking and feel I don't know, defensive about their own drinking. So
Mhm.
those are the only times I've ever really had anyone say anything. And that's only happened maybe once or twice where people are like,
Mhm.
why aren't you drinking? So yeah, people don't care and I'm better to be around. So for me, I don't have and I'm very extroverted, so I'm fortunate in that. I don't have many social inhibitions. So that's my experience.
Yeah. And it is so interesting, right? And law, people will maybe start drinking in law school, a lot of pressures. Again, looking at the culture, I think that was a comment somebody made that it really does revolve around drinking, I think similar to law firm life.
Mhm.
Um, Bernardo, what are your thoughts in terms of working in the legal environment? What do you see as the most challenging for you?
Well, I mean, what I was thinking about with this question is like I think attorneys and most of us that work in the legal profession, like we're problem solvers, right? Like we and Stephen touched on this earlier, right? Like we think that we can control outcomes. We're like trained to believe that we can control outcomes. And that is like an alcoholic as well. Like an alcoholic is trying to control outcome. That was my experience, at least,
Mhm.
trying to control outcomes with my drinking. Um, and so, whether it's like we're pre-selected as lawyers or whether it's part of our training or just the nature of the profession, like I think that we are more likely to believe that we can fix this problem. And that was my experience. Like when I stopped drinking and not seeking recovery and help originally, I remember specifically saying to myself, I do not want to be in a church basement. I don't want to be one of those people relying on a 12-step program. I got this. Like I can focus on like the physical aspect of this, um, but I came to realize that I was wrong about that. But it's that as I went through law school, became a practicing attorney, and there was that combination of like the legal practice and my own sort of personality that really sort of made it difficult for me to realize that I needed somebody else to help. And Stephen talked about this, right? It's like I can't do this alone. I can't address all the different dimensions of my alcoholism on my own. And so that is, I think, a real challenge for folks in the legal profession.
Yeah. What about you,
Amy,
Steve?
I think both something that both Casey said and Bernardo said. When I think about drinking in the legal profession, I think about it from two different aspects. First is as an individual practitioner or member of the legal profession, we work in one of the most intense professions that exists. Um, and for several reasons. One, because for most of the industry, our stock and trade is our time. And the more time you dedicate to the profession, the more risk there is of burnout, being tired, losing focus. Second is because the things that we deal with are really important to our clients, and they expect you to respond with that same degree of importance that they feel. I've yet to have a client call me and ask for help and then say, don't worry about it. It's really not a big deal. Whenever they're calling me, it's because they need my help. So from a personal perspective, um, I know that one of the reasons why I drank for as long as I drank is because it was too easy for me to use alcohol as a way to counter the intensity and pressure and anxiety of the profession. It was too easy to use alcohol to numb my mind, or to take a break, to relax. I now know and knew subconsciously, I think, during much of my career, that was probably the worst way to try to relax. As Casey mentioned, there are a lot of things I don't remember because I was in a blackout from my drinking. There are a lot of mornings I woke up trying to figure out how am I going to figure out what I said at that client reception the night before without telling people that I was in a blackout. And so my efforts to use alcohol to relax really uh, oftentimes created more anxiety, more pressure, and I would work like a nut to kind of make up for those mornings when I was hungover. I to me, I was the classic work hard, party hard. I would, work to 8 or 9 o'clock on a Friday night and then go to a bar to quote relax, as opposed to going home to my family, right? Or on business trips, I would go 24/7 on a business trip of working, entertaining, drinking, and start all over again the next day. So, from a personal perspective, it is incumbent upon all of us to find ways to address the intensity of our profession, which are healthy. And thankfully, our profession, because of organizations like yours and others, are helping lawyers not get to the point where Bernardo and Casey and I got to get by giving them healthy ways to address the stresses of our profession. You can avoid getting to the point where you have to seek help because your substance abuse or alcoholism has begun to destroy your life. The second thing I think about is just the presence of alcohol in our day-to-day life. I am around alcohol often because It's present at our partner meetings. It's present at dinners, entertaining clients. When we have a reception in whatever office I might be in, there is alcohol present for those who drink normally. And the rule of thumb that I use myself is that if I have a legitimate reason to be in the presence of alcohol, then I'm okay. And so if it's a client reception where there's an open bar for clients and I'm there to meet and entertain clients, I have a legitimate reason to be there. And that's what I focus on is the meeting of the clients. And early on in my sobriety, that was difficult. I found myself holding on tightly to a glass of club soda because God forbid somebody might give me a glass of wine. Or somebody might ask, as Casey said, why are you not drinking? Right. And so I would, even though I didn't want it, I'd hold on to this glass of club soda because something was in my hands. Today, I don't do that at all. But today, it doesn't matter because I've come to learn what Casey said, which I think is really important for people to understand. Normal drinkers do not care if you don't drink. Normal drinkers don't even think about the fact that you're not drinking. The people who think about the fact that you're not drinking are people who should probably be in the same rooms that we're in because they're so focused on you're not drinking and I am. And they begin to think, well, what's wrong with me that I'm drinking? And I remember like it was yesterday when I was a seventh year associate and I was in the kind of final rounds of partnership at my firm. And I was on a business trip with a partner. And it was at one of those times when I was in abstinence, where I was basically saying, I can't do this. And we were out to dinner together, and he ordered a bottle of wine. And when the waiter came over, I said, no, thank you. And he looks at me and he says, don't you drink? And I said, not anymore, which I believed at the time. And he said, you cannot be a partner at this firm if you don't drink. And I know he believed it because that was the life he led. I don't think that I didn't then drink that night, because I was worried about not being a partner. But I think that shows the prevalence of drinking in our profession is huge. And thank God the vast majority of people drink responsibly and normally. But there are a lot of us in our profession that drink abnormally and that drink for the wrong reasons and are sliding into, if not already into, full-fledged alcoholism. And it's important for the profession to acknowledge that and to reach out a helping hand to those who have slipped into that situation to prevent their lives from being in their profession from being wrecked.
So thank you. And wow, right, that an attorney's partner said that to you. So it just leads me, I'm going a little off course. Has that happened, Bernardo or Casey, to you? And for viewers out there, how do you respond to something like that? It's a hard question, I know, but
I mean,
anyone want to jump in?
has anyone ever like the same thing that the partner said to Stephen about like you need to? No, I mean, I've not encountered that at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've in the years of practice, I've been practicing law for 15 years now. I've never felt like an outsider because of anything anybody else has done, right? I still can go to that place internally. But when I started disclosing my alcoholism, when I started talking about it more publicly, and even in smaller groups before I was very open about it, there had never been any pressure that I felt externally, which is a good thing. I mean, I think that's a good sign. I think there's different employers and different environments, but that wasn't my experience.
Casey, did you ever have something like that happen?
So, I mean, something kind of similar happened. No, no one said that to me directly, and I don't even want to imagine what I would say back if they did. But um, I was at a dinner, not with one of my clients, but with because I was involved in our pro bono committee. This was not at Proskauer, but at another firm. Um, I was at a through the pro bono committee, long story. Anyway, I was at a dinner with another partner and his client, not a client I knew, not and the partner had heard, I'm sure, because I would send, office-wide emails talking about being the local sober associate. I'm
Mhm.
sure the partner knew in his mind somewhere that I was sober, but we were at a Japanese restaurant and they ordered sake. And he was like, Casey, take a shot. And I was like, oh, I'm okay, thanks. He was like, just take one shot. And I was like, oh no,
Mhm.
I have to work tonight. And he's like, just do it. And I was like, no. Um,
Mhm.
and he dropped it. And we were fine. But that's the only time where I felt like,
Mhm.
someone in a position of authority was telling me to drink.
Mhm.
Um, Otherwise, I mean, I really own it. I just own it and I don't feel ashamed. I did not ever ask to be an alcoholic. It's not like like Steven said, I believed I was wired this way. And it's, now I'm a workaholic, which people appreciate. But a funny story I kind of wanted to tell was actually just like last week or the week before, I was at a conference and in Dana Point, California, beautiful scene. I was holding a women's happy hour with a partner at another firm. We were co-hosting a women's event, and a seafood tower came. And I had previously I ordered a mocktail previously and I grilled the server about the ginger beer and I was like, there's no trace alcohol, right? Nothing, He's like, no, no trace alcohol. And I was like 0.000. He was like 0.000. So, and I had that conversation in front of everyone else at the table. And then this seafood tower came later on and there were like little shot glasses. And I thought, oh, there's a cute little seafood soup with something, an oyster or something in it. Um, and so I picked it up and I tilted it back. And as I was pouring it into my mouth, the woman sitting next to me goes, I think that's alcohol. And I like caught it and I like
Mhm.
panicked and I had a mouthful of vodka for the first time in 13 and a half years. And that was just gross. And I spit it back into the shot glass.
Mhm.
And I excused myself and I went to the bathroom and I washed my mouth out. I came back, I made a joke about it. Everyone moved on. No one thought twice.
Mhm.
But that was in front of like a partner at another firm, clients, potential clients, her client, no one cared. And I literally spat alcohol out
Mhm.
at the table. And we all just moved on with our lives. We're all continue to work together and have great
Mhm.
relationships. And so, I mean, I think people really overhype the whole, what are other people going to think? Are people going to think I'm weird if I'm not drinking? I think the way you handle the situations, like you can really,
Mhm.
spit out alcohol at the table and no one will bat an eye. So
Mhm.
that's
Casey,
my
I think that that's part of what we talked about earlier, which is that substance abuse and alcohol addiction is present throughout our entire lives and relationships, neighbors, families, friends, colleagues. And even though the person we're talking to might not be personally involved in alcohol or substance abuse, what I found over the years is that they know someone who is, and there's a level of empathy and oftentimes curiosity because they've been wondering, what do I do about Uncle Bob? I just don't know how to address the fact that Uncle Bob's drunk all the time. And so when the subject comes up about the fact that I don't drink, it is oftentimes an opportunity to talk about the disease of alcoholism and the recovery process and how it works because it helps that person be educated about something else in their life. And I when we all first met, and Casey's heard this before, um, I think I learned that, and I swear to God, it was just it was my higher power telling me it was going to be okay. Is that back in March of 2010 when I returned from that trip to Houston, and I was confronted at a diner on a Sunday morning by the chair of our firm for whom I worked as managing partner and my wife, and basically given an ultimatum that everything was going to change if I didn't deal with my drinking. I agreed to go to rehab, and then I realized that I would have to talk to several of the senior partners within the firm who were counting on me to help them with their practices and their groups. I'd have to talk to clients about the fact that I wasn't going to be there, and I would have to tell them why. And so the very first person that I was scheduled to talk to was kind of an opportunistic moment because I was at a client lunch with him, and we were then going to walk back to the office. And the entire lunch, I was focused on what am I going to tell this guy and how am I going to explain this? And so the lunch is over, and we start walking back to the office, and I told him I have something personal to tell him. I told him that I had a problem with alcohol, and I was going to go to a rehabilitation center, and that I hoped that he would understand. And he said to me, "Where are you going?" And I told him, and he said, "My son is there right now." And that moment where he opened up to me about the fact that he in a different way was going through the exact same thing that I was about to go through. And so we talked about his son. We talked about where they were, where he was. I started asking him questions about the place because I knew nothing about the place. And that first conversation of what ended up being about 25, 30 conversations that I had to have made every other conversation so easy, so wonderful, because I got a sense that I was not alone in this, and it may be a different. You're touching the disease in a different way, but he was touching the disease in a way that gave him empathy about what I was going through, and that was a tremendous help for me in understanding that we can break down the stigma of this disease. We can help one another and have empathy for one another, and not treat it as something that you should be shameful about.
I, Stephen, I love that point, and I think that sometimes when you talked about, well, he mentioned he has a son in that treatment center, and I think it's just so much more common. And Casey, you had also talked about this, that it's so much in our heads, right? But maybe somebody else is experiencing something similar, or they have their own issues they're worrying about, so not so focused on if you're drinking or not. And somebody did say that if somebody in a professional setting asks them why they don't drink, they say they don't drink for medical reasons, which is true enough. And if they press it, I say I don't want to go into my medical details. So I think that is a good strategy. I know the holidays are coming up, but I want to, before we address that and being in that additional gatherings, and I think we did already touch upon it in general professional gatherings, but what do you do to help cope with stress? Again, Stephen, you talked about, well, that was the way to relax. How do you now, without that alcohol, without a substance, relax or take care of yourself? What are some of your strategies?
I'll kick off first. Hopefully, Bernardo's and Casey's are better than mine. But one of the things I learned when I went to rehab and began to participate in the 12-step program was that you have to learn to love yourself before you can heal. You have to discard the shame, discard the guilt. There's nothing that has happened in the past that you can undo. And so you simply have to push forward, deciding how you're going to live your life from this point forward, as opposed to focusing on the past. Because if I did, I have 37 years of bad behavior, blackouts, driving drunk, DUI, everything. So, in that concept of taking care of myself, I ever since I've been in recovery, I have focused much more on physical exercise. I focus much more on the things that I enjoy to do, which before I used to say to myself, well, that's selfish. You should instead of reading a book, you should write that brief. Instead of spending time with your children just being goofy, you should go fix the broken thing that's in the house. I was a fixer, doer, always busy, always moving forward, and never kind of saying to myself, it's time for yourself. It's time to just kind of regenerate, take a break, do something fun. And so the personal promise I make to myself, which sometimes I break, is that every single day, no matter how busy I am or how intense the practice is, I'm going to do something that brings me joy. And sometimes it's physical exercise because that brings me joy. Sometimes, believe it or not, I'll out myself as a Swiftie. Sometimes it's, getting in the car and turning up Taylor Swift music really, really high. Um, sometimes it's reading a book, but it's sometimes it's just going for a walk on a beautiful day. Um, and so, I wish I could say I have 100% compliance with that goal, but that goal and just knowing that that goal's there helps me deal with the stress of my profession today. I still serve as the managing partner of my firm, which is twice the size that it was when I got sober. I still have a lot of intensity in my day-to-day life, but every day, if I can do at least one thing that brings me joy, it helps me deal with all the other things that I have to deal with.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Bernardo, do you want to share? Or sorry, Casey, did you want to go?
No, I'll let Bernardo go because he hasn't talked long. Go for it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, the magic question, how do you deal with stress? You know, stress challenges, like they don't go away, right? I mean, for me, and I think part of what we learn in recovery is like how to deal with the problems. Like life gets hard. Recovery doesn't make life easy. I think it teaches us how to deal with the challenges. Um, and I think one of the most important things for me, and this is like a broader sort of philosophy, I think, but it's true, is, and it ties into some of the other bits of what we were talking about as it relates to stigma and disclosing. It's like I have to, people that know me, like they actually know me. Like I have to be who I am. Like I can't be like the person behind like the curtain anymore. Like I'm open about like my history and my relationships and like who I am as a father and who I am as a recovering alcoholic and who I am as an attorney and who I am as a son and who I am as like a sometimes Swiftie and it's I like that's helps me build, I think, like resilience. I think it helps me um, feel more comfortable in my own skin because like there's alignment between who I am and how I present myself and who I am and how I behave. Um, and it's there's no hack that makes that happen. There's work. I go to therapy. I exercise. I participate in a 12-step program. Um, I try and do other things. I'm going to Kripalu in a couple weekends, and I'm leaving my phone at my parents' house, and I'm not going to be talking to anybody for 48 hours. And like I do access those things because I do need that. I do that nourishes me. But behind all that um, is how I try and both internally recognize what's important to me, recognize the value for me of being honest with myself and the value of being honest with others. And all that sort of builds, like, for me, um, um, a dynamic and a possibility to respond instead of react, right? To deal with what life throws at us every day. And sometimes those days are stressful, and I'm not good at handling it because none of us are ever perfect. I wake up every morning. I'm Bernardo the alcoholic, and I've got to start over each day. But other days are absolutely, magnificent, and there's a lot of them in between. And so doing this kind of work as well, right? Service work, sharing our stories together, helps with that too.
Excellent. Excellent. Great.
Um,
See, how about you?
yeah, I have, I have one very clear answer that comes to the top of my head here. I take baths. I cannot even, my best friend was preaching this for years. And then I moved into a house in February that has a jetted tub. And it took me a little while, but then I was like, I guess I'll try this thing out. And I got so hooked on it. It is just such an incredible way to relax. So much so that my husband was like, we should probably get a hot tub so that we can, actually talk and hang out while you're doing this. And I was like, yeah, we should. So I just got a hot tub and I redid the whole patio to make the hot tub, give it a better environment. So like it's just become such a focal part of my day. And even as you asked the question, I started thinking about the baths. I'm like, I'm going to take a bath after this. So much so that, not to like sound even crazier as a bath fanatic, but I ask our travel company when they're booking hotels, like, can you please make sure my room has a bathtub? Because it is just like I am in a high stress job. It is a very stressful job. I am handling, 500 million to $1.5 billion deals with little room for error, and everything's high stakes and everything's life and death. It's not actually, we're not ER doctors, but it feels like that sometimes. It feels very high pressure. And that is just a very tangible way that things just melt away. In a perfect world, I would meditate a little bit in the bathtub. I'm trying to work on that, but meditation is something that I'm still striving to incorporate into my daily life. But
so thank you for that. I'll have to remember that, although I have taken baths and I do find it relaxing. So I know that people do have some questions, but before we get there, just do the holidays impact your sobriety at all? I think we talked a little bit about that even at professional events, but I think about it, people who might be a food addict or have issues with being around so much food. It is a time of eating. It is a time typically of drinking. Does that impact you at all with your sobriety? Does it make it harder, or is it just any other time for you?
Early on in my sobriety, I found the holidays difficult because in my own personal family situation, my parents were both dead. Two of my brothers were dead. And when you think about holidays, you think about family, and it wasn't present. And it wasn't present because of the destruction that alcohol caused with my family. So that I think holidays generally bring out emotions in people as they think about their loved ones that are with us and that are no longer with us. They think about their lives. They sometimes it's very lonely. When I was I had some time this afternoon, and I called one of my sons who lives out in Colorado, who's not going to be able to get home for Christmas, and just asking him what he was going to be doing when all of the rest of us were home here in Philadelphia. So when I'm in the rooms of AA around the holidays, I'm very sensitive to people who are going through struggles because those memories or that loneliness, those other things are cropping up, because it's when, in the rooms of AA, there's the phrasing HALT. never get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And the holidays often implicate three of those four. Usually not hunger, but anger because you're dealing with family members you might see all the time, lonely because you are lonely, or tired because you're just running ragged from Thanksgiving right through to New Year's. And so that guidance, never get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, is something that I believe keeps a lot of people sober if they follow that. And it's also, it's to me, it's true in our profession too, that keep yourself on a good, even keel and not put yourself into positions where you're vulnerable to reaching out for that drink or some other unhealthy way of dealing with the stresses that we deal with.
Excellent. Thank you for, of course, pointing out that there's so much emotional pieces to the holiday.
Mhm.
And so I think that was just wonderful what you said. Bernardo, how about you? Again, also thinking about what Stephen said. I mean, family could be great, but there could be anger. There are a lot of other pieces to that experience.
Yeah, similar to Steve, like early on, I think it was more challenging because the holidays are just another reason to drink. And not that like alcoholics need another reason to drink, but there's more people around, there's more people drinking, Thanksgiving, Christmas, we celebrate New Year's Eve, there's reunions around the holidays too. And excuse me, all of it was a reason to drink. Um, but and I was having a conversation with somebody in the program a couple weeks ago, and the way that I think about it, I think we think about it now is that there are so many reasons not to drink, right? And so whether it's family or our own health or the community that we're a part of, I mean, there like every day there's another reason for me not to drink, and sometimes it's every day it's the same reason, but yeah, I think at this time, I mean, there are. I do want to say like there are the corporate events, the work events that can present a little bit of like for me at least some uneasiness. And one thing I did want to say is that like it's okay to say no to those events. Like we don't actually have to go to those events. And something that Steven said, like unless there's like a real um, legitimate other reason to be there. Um, it is 100% okay to say no, I'm not gonna go. And so I've done that. I've done that the last few years at my current employer. Have decided to not go to the evening social event at a bar in Boston. I've
Saying
passed
no,
on that.
right?
Yeah.
Keeping those boundaries.
Yep.
I
Casey,
yeah. So along the lines of saying no, COVID set the precedent of not spending time with family for the holidays. And it was the most relaxing holiday I had ever had. And I love my family so much. They're wonderful people who are very triggering for me. And there are 2 days out of the year that clients will not email me, and they're Thanksgiving and Christmas Day. And the idea of spending those stressed versus spending them relaxing on the couch with my husband and my dog and our honey baked ham, and the sides, because I don't know how to cook. So I heat up the sides in the oven, it is just exactly what I want to do. And I finally, decided that like, I'm not going to just do what society tells me to do or what I feel pressure to do. I'm going to just say, I'm just going to hang out with my husband and dog. And I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. I'm just going to relax because I don't get to do that all the time. And then I'll see my family other times during the year and, controlled doses. Again, love them very much. I'll probably send them the link to this recording. So for the record. But yeah, those are the only 2 days I have. So I protect my time in a way that I never did when I was, more worried about what other people thought or meeting expectations. I realized, I need to guard my time. I need to guard my mental health, and I need to do what's right for me. So.
Excellent. And again, talking about prioritizing yourself and taking care of yourself. And I think that's a big part of that sobriety piece. And then also, it sounds like just thinking about what people said. It was about reaching out for help, right? It's lawyers think that maybe they could do it on their own, but we encourage folks to reach out for help. And I'll just mention really quickly. So LCL here in Massachusetts, we offer peer recovery support groups. We have some that meet in person, some that are online. So all you need to do, it's based on the AA model, but it is not an AA support group. But just go to our website and you'll receive a link and you can join any of those meetings. Every state does have what's called a lawyer's assistance program, which is what we are. And so you could always reach out, because I know there are people in our audience that are outside of Massachusetts. You could always reach out to your own lawyer's assistance program. So again, thank you all for sharing your stories, for being honest and vulnerable. And I know that it is going to encourage folks to reach out for help. So we have a couple of comments I want to read. Somebody mentioned June 23rd, 1992, 33 and a half years sober. It's amazing. Again, somebody else says, thank you all for your authenticity and your humility. So also another comment that this person has been so focused on AA that they've neglected becoming a member of LCL, and they fear that their last jackpot while under the influence has prevented them from ever practicing law again. Any comments, any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's hard to say without, the specifics, but I don't know. I mean, I think that there's always the possibility for a second chance. And I've heard stories of lawyers that have had really big jackpots, that have been in really difficult spots and have been able to practice law, right? I mean, it's putting together the time, it's putting in the work. I think it's possible for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I've seen this is a profession that is not vindictive. And much like, Casey talked about when she met with the character committee of the New York State Bar, what's most important is that you reflect that you're not the person that you were when the actions that you took caused the problems that they caused. I've seen enough lawyers over the course of my time as practicing and as managing partner who have committed mistakes, both personal and professional, but you can rebound from that. You just have to make sure that you're well grounded in your recovery before you seek out that forgiveness and reinstatement that you're looking for.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think the person mentioned they've been sober 19 months. Just, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing the next right thing. Take one step at a time, and more will be revealed.
Yep.
I could not have predicted in a million years the way my life would have unfolded in sobriety. And it is so much better than I thought it would have been. Like, my life is so much better now than anything I would have planned for myself. But I realized I can't plan anything because I just don't know what's going to happen. So just keep doing the next right thing, one step at a time. That's what I'd say.
Absolutely.
And also, I just want to comment, that person also said they should have become a member of LCL way before. And now that misstep may have cost me my bar license. One of the things I'll just point out, what we also offer, one of our clinicians has a professional conduct group. So these folks there have been suspended or been disciplined in some way. And so related to a mental health or substance use disorder. And so For that person, I would encourage you to reach out. Barbara Bowe is the clinician who runs that group. And again, all of our clinicians, I don't think there's ever a time when you shouldn't reach out or that it's too late. And so all four of our clinicians here can help in any way. And then again, we have the peer support groups as well as the professional conduct group. Somebody else says, thank you so very much. They're praying. Thank you for giving them hope. Again, I think that was a big part of this panel. There is hope and there is resiliency. And so we appreciate it. And again, I feel confident that part of having these panels is to allow that person to say, okay, I'm going to reach out, and that I can't do it on my own. I remember different panelists also saying they had tried different things, Stephen, similar to you, reading, just self-help books and all these things to deal with her alcohol issue. And she didn't want to go to AA meetings for fear of people seeing her there. And so finally, with the encouragement of her husband, she went to one AA meeting, and she said that first AA meeting changed her life. So when I hear these stories, I'm like, that's just amazing. And, you know, again, Stephen, as you said, you went to an AA meeting, but maybe didn't go back to the same one. Everybody will have a different experience. But I think the theme is everybody reached out to get that help. That's what I'm interpreting.
I just want to say real quick before I don't ever say it. There's a lot of hope, and also there's a lot of fun. Like there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of joy. You know, I feel like when we talk about these issues so much, it's focused on, you know, what our drinking did to us and the consequences. And when people are living through that, it seems all very dark. But there's just so much light at the end of the tunnel, and life can be so absolutely incredible. And it's not all doom and gloom, and church basements are a lot more fun than they might seem to be. And it is not affiliated with any church, just because they let certain people use their spaces. But yeah, it's fun. So I would say that you have a lot to look forward to. I'm glad I'm an alcoholic, because you know, life would be boring without it. And I feel it's just so enriched by living a sober, happy life.
Excellent. Thank you. I also want to mention that we do have a program coming up in March on the addicted brain, because we also recognize, Stephen, as you pointed out, it is a disease. The brain does change. And so there is the physical aspect of that, that a psychiatrist will be talking about that. And he works quite a bit in substance use disorders. Somebody else also mentioned, again, I think this was in reference earlier to Stephen, when you had that other attorney say, you know, you can't work here if you won't drink. Person says it hasn't happened to them. They're nearing partner level status at their firm and generally open about the fact that I do not drink. So again, you know, I think that it sounds like when you're open about it, people, or, you know, you say, I'm not going to drink. You say, Casey, as you said, no. Again, for not everybody feels comfortable saying that, but there are alternatives, and sometimes the reaction is, oh, okay, and they move on. Any other last comments that you recommend to somebody, advice? I think we've addressed.
Amy, there was actually two questions in the Q&A.
Oh, yes. Okay, good.
One at the top that was just talking about law schools, and another that was talking about meetings. And I know we've only got 5 minutes, but you know, one thing in terms of like addressing this in law schools, it is a cultural shift. And again, there's no quick fix to it. I think one thing that LCL has been doing in Massachusetts, and I don't know if this question came from out of state, but we are starting to have programs as part of orientation, speaking to incoming law students. And as part of that, there's conversations with the administration, right? And so I think that that the conversation just needs to continue, that this work needs to continue, that people like Casey and Stephen and myself and a bunch of others that I know of that are open about this should continue speaking up and speaking with school administrators and other employers and bar leaders and students and lawyers and getting that word out, because I think that's part of what helps that culture shift. And it does need to start in law school, because this problem does begin in law school. And then there was another question. I know, Casey, you answered it, so it doesn't appear under open, but there was a question of like, how do you balance like 12-step meetings with a busy life and family and work and all that? For me, I attend a Sober Dads online meeting. Actually, it's Sunday nights at 8 o'clock, and that's my home group. And that's like the one consistent meeting I do go to. I find other meetings here and there, but I've got that like steady rock. My son knows where I am at 8 p.m. on Sunday nights. My now wife knows where I am at 8 p.m. on Sunday nights. Sort of wherever I am, unless I'm in a plane, I'm on that meeting. So that's been one way to keep me connected to a meeting.
I'll just say I'm so happy to talk about this. If anyone wants to reach out, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Same.
You can find me on my firm website. Feel free to email my firm account. That's fine. So this is my fun. I enjoy this so much to balance out the work. So please reach out if you want to chat.
And taking baths.
Yes.
Yeah, and taking baths.
That's up next. Panel and bath.
Yeah. And I want to thank Casey and Bernardo for being on this panel. It's wonderful to meet other professionals who are in recovery. And Amy, thank you for putting this together. The more we talk about it, the less stigma there is. We bring out of the dark and into the light the reality of mental health challenges in our profession, and the light can cure it, whereas the dark is just going to keep us down. So thank you for doing this.
Well, again, thank you all for participating in this. And this is one of the strongest ways of reducing that stigma and encouraging folks to reach out for help, and hopefully increase it from that 2% that actually do to certainly a higher number. So again, thank you all for your time and being so open and answering the questions. And it's definitely greatly appreciated. And have a wonderful holiday season, everybody, and definitely appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.